The Bare Bones Camera Course for Film and Video by Tom Schroppel. Page 1. Basics. The camera, how it works. The camera is an imperfect imitation of the human eye. Like the eye, it sees by means of a lens which gathers light reflected off objects. The lens directs this light onto a surface which senses the pattern formed by the difference in brightness and color of the different parts of the scene. In the case of the eye, this surface is at the back of the eye sends the pattern of light to the brain where it is translated into an image which we see. Diagram. The eye gathers patterns of reflected light which the brain translates into images we see. In the case of the camera, the lens directs the pattern of light onto a variety of sensitive surfaces. Still film cameras record light patterns on film coated with light-sensitive chemicals. The chemicals react differently to different amounts of colors of light, forming a record or image of the light pattern. After the film is processed in other chemicals, the image becomes visible. Diagram. Still film cameras record light patterns on film coated with light-sensitive chemicals. You'll notice that both the lens of the eye and the lens of the camera turn the light pattern upside down as it passes through. This is because they're both convex lenses, or lenses which curve outward. Because of their physical properties, convex lenses always invert images. In the brain and in the camera viewfinder, the images are turned right side up again. Movie cameras record images in the same way as still film cameras, except they do it more often. 8mm movie cameras normally take 18 different pictures or frames every second. 16mm and 35mm movie cameras take 24 frames per second. When these pictures are projected on a screen at the same fast rate, they will give off the illusion of continuous movement. The viewer's mind fills in the gaps between the individual frames due to a psychological phenomenon known as persistence of vision. Diagram. Movie cameras take many different pictures every second. In digital cameras, both still and video, Page 3. In digital cameras, both still and video, the lens focuses light pattern onto an image sensor, either a CCD, charge-coupled device, or a CMOS, complementary metal oxide semiconductor. The surface of the sensor contains from thousands to millions of tiny light-sensitive areas called picture elements or pixels, which change according to the color and intensity of the light hitting them. In video cameras, the image formed by all the pixels taken together is electronically collected off the sensor at a rate of either 25 or 30 complete images per second. These images can then be recorded or broadcast. Diagram. Video cameras convert light patterns into electronic images. At the viewfinder or TV set, the process is reversed to recreate the original image. Persistence of vision causes the viewer to perceive the separate pictures or frames as continuous movement. Page 4. Exposure. Exposure is the amount of light that comes through the lens and hits the film or CCD chip. The hole in the center of the lens that the light travels through is called the aperture. If this aperture is big, it lets in a lot of light. If it's small, it lets in very little light. The size of the aperture is adjusted by this f-stop ring on the outside of the lens. An f-stop is simply a measure of how big or how little the aperture is. I find that the easiest way to understand f-stops is to think of them in terms of fractions, because that's what they really are. f2 means that the aperture is half as big across the lens as long. f16 means the aperture is 1/16 as big across as the lens is long. Diagram. 25 over 50 equals 1/2 equals f over 2. 3.125 over 50 equals 1/16 equals f over 16. When you look at it this way, it's easy to understand why in a dark room you'll probably be shooting at f2 to let in all the light you can. Conversely, outside in bright sunlight where you've got a lot of light, you'll probably stop down to f11 or f16 to let less light in. Page 5. Now that you understand that, let me point out that in most modern lenses, especially room lenses, what I've just told you isn't absolutely true. An f2 aperture won't physically be exactly half the length of the lens, but optically it will be. It will let through as much light as if it were indeed half the length of the lens, and that's the important thing. F-stops are constructed so that As you go from F1 to F22 and beyond, each stop emits half as much light as the one before. The progression is F1, F1.4, F2, F2.8, F4, F5.6, F8, F11, F16, F22, F32, F45, F64, and so on. F1.4 emits half as much light as F1. F4 emits half as much light as F2.8. Diagram. Each f-stop emits half as much light as the one before. Many of the newer lenses are marked in both f-stops and t-stops, or t-stops alone. T-stops are more accurately measured f-stops. F4s on one lens may not let in exactly the same amount of light as F4 on another lens, but T4 is the same on every lens. It always lets in the same amount of light. Page 6, color temperature. Have you ever been out walking on a cold, dingy day and remarked to yourself how warm and cozy all the lighted windows looked? Well, that was because the light in the windows was of a warmer color than the light outside. Yes, light comes in different colors. If you think about it, you'll see it's true. There's the red glow from an open fire or a sunset, the bluish cast-off sky dark with rain clouds, and the blue-green ghoulish look you get from the fluorescence in an all-night pizzeria. As a general rule, our eyes adjust so well to these different colored lights that we hardly notice them. Not so the camera. Color films and CCD chips can handle only one color of light source at a time that reproduce colors accurately. They do this by means of color temperature and color filters. Color temperature is a way to identify different colors of light sources. It's measured in degrees Kelvin after Lord Kelvin, who devised the system. It's written like this: 2500 K. The idea is you can take a perfectly black body, like a piece of coal, at absolute zero and start heating it up. As it gets hotter, it puts out different colors of light. First red, then blue, then bluish white. The different colors of light are identified by the temperatures at which they occur. 2000 K is the reddish light produced at 2000 degrees Kelvin. 8000 K is the bluish light produced at 8000 degrees Kelvin. As I mentioned above, color films and CCDs can handle only one color of light source at a time. To take pictures under a different colored light source, color filters are used to convert the existing light to the color temperature required. Page 7. Professional video cameras have built-in filters which you set according to the light you'll be shooting under. A typical filter selection might include tungsten incandescent, 3200 K, mixed tungsten and daylight fluorescent, 4300 K, or daylight, 5400 K, and shade, 6600 K. Fluorescent light, strictly speaking, has a discontinuous spectrum and doesn't fit into the Kelvin system. Still, a 4300 filter setting will give you adequate color reproduction. Once you select the correct color filter on a video camera, fine-tune the color by adjusting your white balance. This procedure varies from camera to camera and can be as simple as pushing a single button. It assures that the whites in your scene reproduce as whites. The other colors then fall into place. Color movie films are manufactured for two kinds of light: 3200 K tungsten and 5400 K daylight. If you shoot tungsten film in tungsten light, you don't need a filter. Likewise, if you shoot daylight film in daylight. To shoot tungsten film in daylight, put a number 85 filter on the front of the lens or in a filter slot on the camera. This orange filter converts 5400 bluish daylight to reddish 3200 K tungsten. To shoot daylight film inside with tungsten light, use a number 80A filter. This blue filter converts reddish tungsten light to bluish daylight. For photo floodlights 3400 K, use a number 80B filter. Setting exposure on a video camera. First, select the correct filter and adjust your white balance as discussed above. If your camera has automatic exposure and you can't turn it off, all you can do is avoid large light areas and large dark areas within the frame. These will throw your exposure off. Page 8. Professional video cameras have both auto and manual exposure. To manually change your exposure, look in the viewfinder and move the f-stop ring until the picture looks good. Most cameras also have an indicator in the viewfinder to tell you when your exposure is correct. With a newer strange camera, it's a good idea to make a test recording under various lighting conditions and play it back on a good monitor to check the calibration of your camera's viewfinder. Sometimes you'll have to go a little darker or a little lighter in the viewfinder to get the best color on playback. The main problem with video cameras is large areas of white, particularly those caused by strong backlight light, shining toward the camera from behind the subject. If you include too much pure bright white in your frame, all the other pure bright white into your frame, all the other colors go dark. Sometimes the white will bleed over into the other colors. White problems are seen clearly in your viewfinder, so they're easily avoidable by moving the camera or subject or both, or by changing your lighting or scenery. Setting exposure in a film camera. ISO. Check the film label to see what ISO your film is. ISO stands for International Standards Organization. The ISO number indicates the speed or sensitivity of the film. The lower the number, the less sensitive, and the slower the film is. The more light you need to get a usable picture. The higher the number, the more sensitive, the faster the film is, and the less light you need to get a usable picture. Film speed may also indicate an ASA for American Standard Association, or EI for Exposure Index. For all practical purposes, ASA and EI numbers are equivalent to ISO numbers. Page 9. ISO numbers progress geometrically in terms of sensitivity. Each time you double the ISO number, you have the amount of light needed to get to the usable image. Each time you double the ISO, you cut your light requirement in half. Slower, low ISO films generally produce a higher quality picture. Faster, higher ISO films, while requiring much less light, generally produce grainier, lower quality images. Color temperature. Make sure the color temperature of your film is the same as the color temperature of the light you're filming under. If not, put on a number 85 filter to use a tungsten film in daylight, or put on a number 80A filter to use daylight film and tungsten light. Remember, anytime you use a filter on the camera, you're reducing the amount of light reaching the film. This means you have to have that much more light entering the lens to compensate for the light soaked up by the filter. Since your light requirements have gone up, you've effectively lowered your ISO. Look once more at the chart above and you'll see what I mean. Higher light requirement equals lower ISO number. To determine the correct ISO for the film filter combination you're using, check the manufacturer's information sheet for that particular film. Page 10. Light meters. Light meters measure the amount of light hitting them. Then, based on the ISO of your film and the number of frames per second you're shooting, they tell you what f-stop to set for the best exposure of your scene. For all intents and purposes, light meters see everything in black and white, in terms of lightness and darkness. They don't react to the color of the subject, only to its lightness or darkness. On most cameras with built-in meters and on handheld light meters, you must manually set the ISO. The method varies, but be sure you do it. Otherwise, the meter won't know how much light your film requires and will give you incorrect exposures. Overexposure. Overexposure means you let too much light in. The picture is too light washed out. Underexposure means you didn't let enough light in. The picture is too dark. Using a light meter. Using a light meter. If you have an automatic exposure camera and you cannot manually override it, all you can do is try to avoid large light and dark areas in your frame, which will throw your exposure off. On-camera exposure meters are called reflective meters. They measure the light reflected at the camera by whatever it is you're pointing the camera at. Handheld reflective meters work the same way. On-camera and handheld reflective light meters measure light reflected off the subject. Reflective meters work on the basis of a theoretical average subject which is gray and reflects 18% of the light hitting it. You can buy an 18% gray card from Kodak. No matter where you point it, the meter will tell you the f-stop needed to reproduce the subject as if it were 18% gray. Page 11. This usually gives you a satisfactory exposure. However, for lighter than average gray subjects, you have to open up your aperture to reproduce a subject as lighter than 18% gray. For darker than average subjects, close down to let less light in and reproduce the subject correctly as darker than 18% gray. How much you have to learn by experience. For most film work, the best way to measure light is with a handheld incident light meter. The incident meter has a white half sphere which you hold in front of your subject, pointing toward the camera. The meter measures the light falling on that particular spot and calculates an f-stop for an average 18% gray subject. It's essentially the same as taking a reflective reading off a gray card held in front of your subject. This gives you the correct exposure for almost any subject, since once you set your exposure correctly for 18% gray, all the other reflectance values fall into place. A white subject with 90% reflectance reproduces as 90% white. 0% black reproduces as 0% black. 50% gray reproduces as 50% gray, and so on. Diagram. Incident light meters measure light falling on the subject. Normally, the only time you have to adjust the incident reading is when you want to reproduce something darker or lighter than it really is. For example, you might want to open up your aperture to lighten and show more detail in a very black face, or close down and darken a very white face to see more detail in it. Page 12. Page 12, lenses. The human eye is a wonder. With a single lens, it can concentrate on a tiny detail of a scene, excluding all else, and in the next instant take in a whole panorama. Unfortunately, the camera is not so versatile. It requires many different lenses to even approximate the performance of the eye. Every camera has one lens which is considered the normal lens. This is the lens which comes closest to reproducing objects with the same perspective as the human eye. That is, objects appear to be the same size, proportion, and distance as if it weren't looking through the camera at all, but seeing them with the naked eye. The normal lens usually includes a horizontal area of about 25 degrees. On a 16mm camera, the normal lens has a focal length, its optical measurement, of 25 millimeters. On a 35mm camera, it's 50 millimeters long. On a video camera with a 2/3 CCD chip, the normal lens is 25 millimeters long. The other lenses on the camera are classified wide angle if they include a larger area than the normal lens, and telephoto if they include a smaller area. Diagram. Wide-angle lenses are shorter than normal lenses. Telephoto lenses are longer. If your normal lens is 25mm, your wide angle might be 12mm, and your telephoto 100mm. Page 13. Wide-angle and telephoto lenses have special characteristics, which can be summarized as followed. Diagram. Characteristics for wide angle. Includes a larger area than the normal lens at the same distance, good for cramped quarters where you can't move the camera back any further. Subject is smaller in the frame than with the normal lens at the same distance. Exaggerates depth, makes elements appear farther apart than normal. Because of exaggerated distances, movements toward and away from the camera seem faster than normal. Move 6 inches toward the camera and it looks like you're moving 18 inches. Because of smaller image sizes, camera jiggles are less noticeable, good for hand holding the camera. Characteristics of telephoto lens. Includes a smaller area than the normal lens at the same distance, good for distant subjects where you can't move the camera closer. Subject is larger in the frame than with the normal lens at the same distance. Compresses depth, makes elements appear closer together than normal. Because of compressed distances, movements toward and away from the camera seem slower than normal. Move 18 inches toward the camera and it looks like you're moving 6 inches. Because of larger image size, camera jiggles are more noticeable, bad for hand holding the camera. Wide angle and telephoto lenses reproduce faces in a different way. Wide angle, features become spread out, bulbous. Telephoto, features become flattened out, compressed. The more extreme wide angle lenses suffer from geometric distortion. Vertical and horizontal lines become curved near the edges of the frame. Diagram. Page 15. Focus. The healthy human eye normally sees an image in focus. That is, it's sharp and clear, not blurred. This is because the lens of the eye automatically brings each light ray to a sharp point on the light-sensitive surface of the back of the eye. The pattern formed by all these sharp points of the light taken together forms a clear, sharp image. Automatic focus cameras, which emulate the eye, don't always work the way you want them to. When you have the time, it's usually best to do the focusing yourself. To focus a camera which doesn't have through-the-lens viewing, you measure or estimate the distance of the subject from the camera, then move the focus ring to the lens to that setting. Focusing is easier, quicker, and shorter on cameras with through-the-lens viewing systems. This is because there's no guesswork involved. What you see is what you get. All you do is look in the viewfinder and turn the focus ring on the lens till your subject looks sharp and clear. If possible on a film camera, you should open the lens to its widest aperture for focusing. I'll explain why in the following section on the depth of field. Some cameras have focusing eyepieces, which use little diopter rings to adjust the focus of the image in the viewfinder to the individual eye of the camera person. Adjustable eyepieces are especially useful for people who wear glasses but who prefer or need to shoot without them. It's not a good idea to wear glasses when shooting with a through-the-lens film camera. Light entering the viewing system from around the edges of your glasses can fog the film. If your camera has a focusing eyepiece, do adjust it to your eye. Otherwise, you'll never see a perfectly sharp image through the lens, and you'll never be 100% sure of your focus. To adjust a focusing eyepiece, page 60. To adjust a focusing eyepiece, first point the camera at a bright area, the sky or a white wall, for example. Open the lens to its widest aperture. Throw the lens out of focus. Turn the focus ring until everything is as blurry as possible. Then, on a film camera, turn the diopter ring on the eyepiece until the ground glass of the viewfinder screen is in the focus. Until the textured surface of the screen is as sharp and clear as possible. On a video camera, adjust the diopter ring until the messages on the viewfinder screen are as sharp as possible. That's all there is to it. Now you're ready to focus the lens with complete confidence. Zoom lens. Most cameras use a zoom lens, which combines a wide range of focal lengths in a single lens. By moving a single control, you can switch from wide angle to normal to telephoto, or anywhere in between, without changing lenses. This makes it a lot easier and quicker to compose your shots. If you want a little wider frame, zoom back to the wide angle. For a closer shot, zoom in to telephoto. There's a special way to focus a zoom lens. First, zoom all the way in on your subject with the lens in maximum telephoto position. Focus the lens even if all you see is an eyeball. Then zoom out wide and find your final framing. Your subject will remain sharp in the focus at any zoom setting, as long as neither the camera or the subject changes position. When possible on a film camera, you should also open the lens to its widest aperture for focusing. We'll learn why in the following section on depth of field. Page 17, depth of field. Depth of field is simply the area in front of your camera where everything looks sharp and in focus. For example, if you're focused on somebody standing 10 feet in front of the camera, your depth of field might be from 8 to 14 feet. That means objects falling within that area will be acceptably sharp and in focus. Objects falling outside the area will be soft and out of focus. Diagram depth of field. There are several important things to know about depth of field. First is this: your depth of field decreases as you increase your focal length. In other words, with a telephoto lens, you have a much shallower area in focus than with a normal lens. That's why with a zoom lens, you zoom into telephoto for focusing. It makes it easier to see the exact point where your subject is sharpest. Diagram: telephoto equals less depth of field. Focal length equals length of the lens measured optically, not physically. Page 18. The next thing you know is your depth of field increases as you decrease your focal length. With a wide-angle lens, you have much deeper area in focus than with a normal lens. This is why when you're shooting an uncontrolled situation with a zoom lens and don't have time to zoom in and check focus, you're better off setting your approximate focus and staying at wide angle. This will give you the best chance of keeping everything in acceptable focus. Diagram: wide angle equals greater depth of field. Another thing about depth of field: your depth of field increases as you close down your aperture. At f16, you have more depth of field than at f2. When you make your aperture smaller, it's essentially the same as squinting your eyes to see something sharper in the distance. This is why on film cameras we open the lens to its widest aperture to focus. It makes it easier to see the exact focus point. Diagram: large aperture equals less depth of field. Small aperture equals greater depth of field. Page 19. Next, your depth of field increases as your subject gets farther away from the camera. The farther away the subject, the more depth of field. The closer the subject, the less depth of field. Diagram: distant subject equals greater depth of field. Close subject equals less depth of field. Finally, you always have less depth of field in front of your point of focus than behind it. This is especially noticeable at distances of 25 feet or less. At these near distances, you can usually figure on your depth of field extending approximately a third in front and 2/3 behind your point of focus. So if you're working with a shallow depth of field and you want to take maximum advantage of it, focus on a point 1/3 of the way into the area you want in focus. Page 20, diagram: depth of field. Focusing in the middle leaves the front man out of the focus. Depth of field diagram: focusing on a point 1/3 of the way in puts everybody in focus. Page 21. 2. Composition. The camera, a tool for selective vision. The camera is a tool for looking at things in a special way. It's a window on the world which you control. Your viewer, the person who will look at the pictures you take, will see only what you decide to show him. This selectively is the basis for all camera work. Diagram: the camera is selective. You decide what the viewer will see. Say you're shooting a program about a high school. The decisions you as a camera person will make will shape the reality of the school as perceived by your viewer. Leave student A out of your frame, and for your viewer, he will never exist. Include B, C, and D in a number of shots, and they become important persons. Show E studying by himself, and he becomes a loner. By choosing what to shoot and how to shoot it, you create your own selective version of the high school. How close your version comes to reality depends on your camera skills and how you use them. Page 22. Use a tripod. To appreciate a good composition, the viewer must first see it without distractions. One of the most common distractions is camera jiggle caused by shaky hand-holding of the camera. Shaky pictures are okay if you're shooting an earthquake or if you're in the middle of a person riot or some other precarious situation. Most of the time, those shaky pictures are just plain annoying to the viewer. They make it harder for him to see what's happening, and they remind him of the camera. They destroy the illusion that he's seeing the real thing. When editing scenes together, the only thing more distracting than a shaky shot of a building inserted between two nice steady shots is two different shaky shots, one after the other, with one shaking up and down and the other shaking side to side. Where they come together, it looks like the cut was made with a chainsaw. So use a tripod whenever possible. A good tripod, preferably with a fluid head, will give you a steady frame, make your camera smoother, and keep your arms and the rest of your body from getting tired so quickly. It's not that much trouble to use a tripod. With practice, most people can set up and level a tripod in less than 30 seconds. But if you don't have a tripod, or if you're someplace where a tripod would get in the way, or you're just moving too fast to bother with it, you can still try for tripod-like support. Use a monopod or a shoulder brace. Lean against a wall, a chair, or your assistant. Try for at least 3 points of support for the camera. With a well-balanced news camera, these would be your shoulder, your hand on the grip, and the side of your head. If you can brace the elbow of your camera supporting arm against your side, so much the better. Page 23. Rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is an old theory about composition and still works pretty well. It won't compose the picture for you, but it'll at least give you some place to start. The idea is to mentally divide the frame into thirds horizontally and vertically. Then you place your elements along the lines, preferably with the center of interest at one of the 4 points where the lines cross. Here are some examples of composition improved by rule of thirds. Diagram: without rule of thirds, with rule of thirds. Page 24 is more diagrams of without rule of thirds and with rule of thirds. Page 25. Diagram without rule of thirds, with rule of thirds. In paintings, still photos, and feature films, you'll see many interesting and good compositions that don't comply with the rule of thirds. But remember, such compositions being more complicated require more time from the viewer to comprehend. His eyes will roam around before he sees what you want him to see. If you can afford to leave an unusual composition on the screen 15 or 20 seconds or more, it can work, often nicely. But be sure to know what you're doing and why. For most documentary films and TV work, the rule of thirds is a good, safe bet. Page 26, balance leading looks. One of the most common errors among camera persons everywhere is the failure to leave enough space in front of the people's face when they are looking to one side or the other. A shot like this is annoying to look at. Psychologically, the viewer perceives the man as boxed in with no place to go. By moving the frame just a little like this, you get more comfortable composition. You've allowed for the compositional weight of the look. People aren't the only things that have looks. Almost everything has a look. Some examples follow on the next page. Page 27, leading looks continued with diagrams. Page 28, balance masses. Sometimes you see a scene with a large object on one side and nothing significant on the other side. Even though it doesn't look all that bad, you still feel a little uneasy about it. That's because it's off balance in terms of mass. This is the most pleasantly corrected by placing a smaller object at some distance away within the frame. Visual leverage then balances the two nicely like this. Diagram: unbalanced, balanced. Of course, you can balance out with another object the same size in the frame, but it usually ends up kind of static and unexciting. Diagram: balanced. Page 29. Remember, when we're balancing masses, we're not concerned with the true size of things. All that matters is how big they look through the camera. Objects closer to the camera will always appear larger. Those farther away will appear smaller. Depending on the camera angle, a house in the distance can balance out a man in the foreground. Diagram and some examples. Page 30. Balance colors. The most important thing to know about colors is that bright ones attract the viewer's eye. How often have you seen a TV interview on location somewhere and found yourself watching, not the interview, with some guy in a red shirt in the background? Your eye just naturally goes to white or brightly colored areas in the frame. Once you know this fact, you can use it to help your picture. First off, try to arrange your frame so that the brightest area is also the area you want the viewer to look at first. Consider the following example where we want the viewer to look at the man. Graphic. No good, eye goes to the wall instead of the man. Better, eye goes to the man. When you include a bright object or area in your frame, remember that its brightness gives it extra weight in the composition. Weight you have to balance out, either with another bright area or with a larger mass. Page 31. More drawings showing off balance and balance. Although the masses of the flowers and of the pot balance out, the brightness of the flower pulls the composition to the left. The brightness of the pot now balances out the brightness of the flower. Page 32, another balanced picture. Here's the brightness of the flower. Here the brightness of the flower is balanced out by placing a large mass on the other side of the frame. Page 33, angles. Reality has 3 physical dimensions, height, width, and depth. In pictures, we have only 2 dimensions, height and width. To give the illusion of depth, we show things at an angle so that we can at least see 2 sides. Picture flat, angled. The angle created by the difference in height between the camera and the subject makes a definite impression on the viewer. Illustration. When the camera and the subject are at the same height, it gives the feeling that the viewer and the subject are of equal value. Graphic. When the camera is higher than the subject, it gives the feeling that the subject is inferior, smaller, less important. When the camera is lower than the subject, graphic. When the camera is lower than the subject, it gives the feeling that the subject is superior, larger, and more important. By raising or lowering your camera, you can subtly influence how your viewer will perceive your subject. This is used for great effect in horror films and political TV commercials. Page 35, frame within the frame. Often you can take a picture more interestingly by using elements of your location to create full or partial frames within the camera frame. And then some graphics of okay and better shots. Page 36. This type of framing can also be used to hide or obstruct unwanted elements. For example, a cut tree branch held near the camera can cover up an ugly sky or a billboard in the background. No good, better. Page 37, leading lines. A nice way to direct the viewer's eye to your subject is through the use of leading lines. Here are some examples. Viewer's eye is drawn in here. Not very good. Lines of fence now lead to man. Better. Viewer's eye is drawn here. Diagram. Not very good. From this angle, the path leads away from the house. Better. From this angle, the path leads toward the house. Page 38. Viewer's eye is drawn here. Not very good. The lines lead away from the flowers on the table. In this diagram, better. All lines now lead to the flowers on the table. Page 39, backgrounds. The best background is the one that stays where it belongs, in the background. Unfortunately, some types of backgrounds push forward and call attention away from the foreground subjects. Let's look at some of the more common distracting backgrounds and ways to avoid them. Graphic. Problem. Door frames, window frames, trees, poles, etc. that grow out of people's heads. Solution. Move the camera, the subject, or both. Graphic. Problem. Backgrounds that are too visually busy, so full of details and colors similar to those of the subject, that the subject becomes buried in the background. Solution number 1. Move the camera, the subject, or both. Solution number 2. Move the camera far enough back from the subject so you can use a telephoto focal length. This will give you a more shallow depth of field, throwing the background out of focus while leaving the subject sharp. Page 40. Graphic. Problem. Unusual or persistent movements in the background. Solution. Move the camera, the subject, or both. One quick way to remove a distracting background element from your frame is to move closer to your subject. Drop the camera to a lower level and shoot up. Diagram. A lower camera angle removes distracting elements. Page 41. Another way to eliminate a distracting element in the background is to place either the subject or another object in the foreground to block the camera's view of the distracting element. Diagram. From above, solution number 1. The camera is moved around so that the man's body hides the sign in the background. Solution number 2. From above. A plant placed between the camera and the sign hides the sign. Page 42. In search of a good composition. A common mistake made by camera persons everywhere is to arrive at a location, set up the camera in the first clear space that looks pretty good, and go from there. If you do this, you're shortchanging yourself. Sure, go ahead and set the camera down, but then take a quick walk around. As you walk, go up on your toes, squat down, lean from side to side. Find your best angle for framing, background, and color and balance. The whole operation can take less than a minute, and it's well worth your time. If you're having trouble visualizing shots, carry the camera around with you and look through it to find your angle. Remember, you don't have to accept the location exactly as you see it. If you've got a couple of minutes, you can rearrange furniture, remove distracting elements, add interesting ones, do all kinds of things to improve your composition. Look, then look again, as critically as you can. The human eye has a tendency to cancel out unimportant details, but the camera sees and records everything fully. Think back to that perfect shot of a wilderness sunset you took on vacation, only to discover when you picked up the prints that you had telephone wires running across the frame. When you learn to see the wires before you take the picture, then you can call yourself a camera person. Page 43, basic sequence. How a basic sequence works. Graphic. Look at this shot. Imagine that the man is talking to the boy. Let's say he talks for 30 seconds. Try looking at that picture while you count 1, 1002, 1, 1001, 1, 1002, and so on up to 30 seconds. If you're normal, you won't get much past 1010 before your eye starts wandering. Now look at this sequence of shots. Count to 1, 1005 at each one before moving to the next. Graphics. That was a lot easier, wasn't it? So what have we proved? We've proved that it's easier to look at 6 different images in 30 seconds than to look at one single image for the same time. That's page 44. That's the idea behind the basic sequence, to break up one long scene into several shorter scenes. This makes the story more interesting for the viewer. It also gives us the opportunity in editing to vary the length and emphasis of the story as we desire. Let's review the basic sequence we've just seen shot by shot and see how it works. Graphic wide shot. A wide shot or establishing shot is simply that, a shot that's wide enough to establish your subject in the mind of the viewer. In this particular case, we see the man, the boy, and enough of their surroundings to establish that they're in the great outdoors. Remember, a wide shot doesn't have to show everything, just everything that's important. A wide shot of a mountain would be a landscape. A wide shot of a man typing would show only the man and his computer, eliminating from the shot the rest of his desk and the surrounding office. A wide shot of an ant would be a fraction of an inch across. Page 45, graphic medium shot, graphic of a close-up. The medium shot and the close-up are, like the wide shot, endlessly variable, depending on your subject and your own point of view. Essentially, the close-up is the tightest, the closest you choose to be to your subject. In a person, it's usually a full headshot as shown here. The medium shot falls somewhere in between the wide shot and the close-up. Graphic cutaway. The cutaway is the one shot that lets you easily change the length and or order of your sequence. It's the shot most often forgotten by camera persons and the most often needed by editors. In our sequence of the man and the boy, let's say that instead of talking for 30 seconds, the man talked for 2 minutes. The middle minute and a half of which was boring. So in editing, we let the man talk for the first 15 seconds, cut away to the boy listening, throw out the boring middle of the talk, then cut back to the man for the final 15 seconds. So instead of this, 1 through 6 graphics, we have this. 1 graphic, cutaway, 6, the end. The splice in the soundtrack between scenes 1 and 6 is covered by the cutaway of the boy listening. The most common cutaway is a shot of the reporter listening to TV interviews. However, anything can serve as a cutaway, as long as it's related to the main action but not visually connected to it. Page 47. That's the great value of a cutaway. When you cut to it, it doesn't have to match anything in the main shot you're cutting away from. For example, a sequence of a man making toys can be shortened or rearranged by cutting away to shots of already completed toys on the shelves, or the toy maker's face can serve as a cutaway from close-up actions of his hands working on the toy. If you look hard enough, you can find a cutaway for just about any sequence you shoot. In the interview with an athlete, his photos and trophies are cutaways. If a woman is just sitting and talking to the camera, a close-up of her hands in her lap is a cutaway. An extreme wide shot or a shot from behind can also be a cutaway. Cutaways can serve to enhance the story. If a man is talking about how he won an auto race, you can cut away to footage of the race while continuing his voice on the soundtrack. If an interviewee mentions a person who helped her in her career, you can cut away to a shot of that person. Shooting a basic sequence. The most important thing to remember in shooting a basic sequence is that each new shot should, if at all possible, involve a change in both image size and camera angle. This not only makes the sequence more interesting, but as we'll see, it makes it much easier to cut back and forth between shots. On the following page is a diagram from above showing where I place the camera for the sequence of the man talking to the boy. Diagram. Page 48. Camera setup basic sequence. Notice that between the wide shot, medium shot, and close-up, I changed my camera angle by at least 45 degrees. You should always try to move your camera at least that much. It's pretty obvious that a change in image size and angle between shots makes for a more interesting sequence. What's not quite so obvious is that it makes the transition from shot to shot smoother and easier to accomplish. With rare exceptions, most non-studio work is shot with a single camera. This means your subject has to repeat himself for the medium shots and close-ups. He's not always going to be able to remember to duplicate his actions exactly for every take. Page 49. So you might end up having to cut from a wide shot where he's looking straight ahead to a medium shot where his head is inclined slightly downward. If you change image size and not camera angle, you'll see the man's head jerk down on the cut. This is called the jump cut. Diagram. Change in image size on the only equals jump cut. But if you change not only the image size but also the camera angle, you'll be home free. The combination of image change and angle change will alter the viewer's perspective just enough for him not to notice the slight mismatch in head position. Page 50. Change in image size and angle equals smooth transition. Often you'll find that a change in image size and camera angle will cover even greater mismatches. One special situation. When your subject is talking directly to the camera and you change camera angles, be sure to show the subject physically pivoting his body from one camera position to the other. Otherwise, the abrupt change in background will confuse the viewer. If you prefer in the editing, you can cut on the action of the turn. They do this every night on your local news show when the anchor turns to a new camera and says, "On the local scenes," cutting on the action. A good way to get smooth transitions between shots is to cut on the action. The viewer's eyes naturally follow movement on the screen. If a movement begins in one shot and ends in the next, the viewer's eye will follow the action right across the cut without paying much attention to anything else. Page 51. Let's say the man in our original basic sequence takes off his hat. We shoot the wide shot down to the point where he completes the action by removing his hat. Then we set the camera up for the medium shot and have him begin the medium shot by repeating the action of removing his hat. Wide shot, medium shot, graphics. Then in the editing, we cut on the action so that he starts removing his hat in the wide shot and completes the removal in the medium shot. Without even realizing it, the viewer is carried smoothly from one shot to the next. Graphic. Wide shot plus medium shot equals cutting on the action. There are a lot of obvious situations where it's convenient to cut on the action. For example, opening doors, getting out of cars, sitting down, standing up, reaching for objects, walking, running, jumping, almost any kind of movement. The important thing to remember is that the last action of the first shot has to be repeated at the beginning of the second shot, so you have to shoot the same movement twice. This is called overlapping action. Page 52, clean entrance, clean exit. Having a clean entrance and a clean exit is almost as good as having a million different cutaways. Clean entrances and exits give you a terrific flexibility in your editing. Let's say, for example, that you're shooting an explanation of the controls on a complicated piece of equipment. Your master shot, the one where you keep the camera running for the whole explanation, looks like this. As the man explains the different buttons, he touches them and turns them. When you finish the master shot, move in for a close-ups of the different knobs. Start each shot showing only the knob on the machine. Then have the man's hand come in, clean entrance. Fiddle with the knob and go out again, clean exit. Leaving once more just the knob in the frame. Diagram, clean entrance, clean exit. So what does this do for us? Well, first off, if you cut to the knob, wait a beat, then have the hand enter. You don't have to worry about matching the position of the man's hand from the wide shot to the close-up, because when you cut to the close-up on the hand, the hand isn't yet in the frame. Page 53. Diagram. Nothing has to match over this cut. Clean entrance. Secondly, let's say you decide after the shot that you only have time to explain the most important controls and you're going to have to eliminate some of the middle explanations. Easy as pie. Just go to a close-up of the last knob before the section you want to eliminate. Let the hand exit cleanly, wait a beat, then cut to the wide shot, picking it up after the drop section. Since you're cutting from a close-up of the knob without a hand, nothing has to match when you go back to the wide shot at a much later point in the explanation. Diagram, clean cut, nothing has to match over this cut. Page 54. If you think about it, you can see that there are many ways the sequence could be rearranged by taking advantage of the clean entrance and exits of the hand. Let's look at another example. Say you've got a wide shot of a car driving by and you have to cut to a different shot of the same car, but the background is different. If you just cut from one shot to the other, the change in backgrounds will be very noticeable. But if you let the car exit the frame on the first shot, hold a beat, then cut to the new shot with a different background, it'll work. By not seeing the car for a second or two, the audience will accept that it had time to get to a different place for the following shot. Diagram. Clean exit. Nothing has to match over this cut. Or you could accomplish the same thing by cutting to the new shot without the car there, waiting a beat, and then letting the car make a clean entrance. Diagram. Nothing has to match over this cut. Clean entrance. Page 55. Clean entrances and clean exits are very helpful in getting people quickly from one place to another. Say you have a sequence of a boy walking into his house and upstairs to his room. Rather than follow him all the way up with the camera, just show him walking to the front door, clean exit, and cut to his room as he enters it. Clean entrance. Diagram, clean exit, clean entrance. Clean entrances and exits are good for almost any kind of shot where somebody or something is moving from one place to another, picking something up, putting something down, hitting, pulling, selecting, etc. Whenever you have anything moving through your frame, particularly in a close-up, you'll be doing yourself a big favor by giving it either a clean entrance or a clean exit, or both. This will always allow you greater freedom in your editing. Some final words on basic sequences. Only amateurs and some geniuses plan on making every cut a match cut. The more you cover yourself with changes in image size, changes in camera angles, cutaways, overlapping actions, and clean entrances and clean exits, the better your final product will be. Remember, any still photographer can shoot a bunch of pretty shots, but only a real cameraman can shoot a sequence. Page 56. 4. Screen direction. Screen direction and crossing the line. Screen direction is the direction people and things face when viewed through the camera. Have you ever been watching a conversation on TV between two people when suddenly the scene changes and it looks like one of them is talking to the back of the other's head? That's called reversed screen direction. The camera person caused it by crossing the line. The line is also known as the axis of action, or simply the axis. By whatever name, it's an imaginary line which determines the direction people and things face when viewed through the camera. When you cross a line, you reverse the screen direction on everything you see through the camera, even though nothing has moved but the camera. In our sequence of the man talking to the boy, the line would intersect the man and the boy. Diagram. Crossing the line reverses your screen direction. Page 57. As long as the camera stays on the front side of the line, the man will be looking screen left and the boy will be looking screen right. If you cross the line, they'll be looking in just the opposite directions, although they haven't moved at all. Now this is really no problem as long as you stay on one side of the line or the other, but you can't go jumping back and forth. Say you make your wide shot from one side of the line, like this. Diagram. Then for some reason you shoot your cutaway of the boy from the other side, like this. Diagram. Page 58. When you cut them together, you get this. Diagram equals reverse screen direction equals confusion. It looks like the boy is turned completely around with his back to the man. Let's take another example. A person working at a computer. See what happens when you cross the line? Diagram reverse screen direction equals confusion. It looks like she's got her head twisted backwards. Twisted on backwards. Page 59. There are circumstances in which you have to cross the line, whether you want to or not. Maybe your subject's body is blocking a new detail you need to show. Maybe part of your sequence looks better from the other side of the line. Maybe you have no control over your subject's movements. Whatever, don't fear. There are ways to cross the line without confusing your viewer. The easiest way is when your subject changes direction or on camera within the frame. You stand still and the line actually crosses under you. For example, a car turning around or a person turning from a friend on his right to a friend on his left. As long as the change in screen direction is made on camera, there's no confusion. Diagram. Crossing the line. Subject changes direction on camera. Another way is to cross the line in one continuous move with the camera. In uncontrolled situations, this is sometimes your only recourse. Say a race car mechanic is working on a car and he moves so you can't see what he's doing. All you can do if you want the shot is to keep the camera running and walk around where you can see what's going on. Diagram. Crossing the line in a continuous camera move. You see this type of shot frequently in TV commercials and feature films. It's usually done with a dolly, a camera platform on wheels. Sooner or later, we all get in a situation when we're finished up shooting a sequence and we know we've jumped back and forth across the line. No matter what the reason, we've got to figure some way to save the day. This is where my favorite line crossing method comes in handy. It's based on a simple truth. You can cross the line if you stop on it. You can go from one screen direction to another if you put a neutral shot with no screen direction in the middle. As long as you have at least one neutral shot as a bridge, you can cross the line. Page 61, diagram. Neutral shots on the line. No screen direction. You can cross the line if you stop on it. Page 62. You'd be amazed at the mileage you can get out of one or two good neutral shots. One neutral shot, which doesn't always occur to everybody, is the POV, the point of view shot. In this sequence of the woman typing, the point of view would be a shot on the computer screen from the point of view of the typist. Point of view on the line, no screen direction. Crossing the line with a point of view shot. Often you can fake a point of view shot after your subject is left. From the close-up of the computer screen, who says you have to use the same person if you don't see your hands in the shot? Or if you need to show hands, you can still use another woman with similar hands. There are two other ways to cross the line, which, though not perfect, are certainly better than nothing. First is the situation where you have a clean point of reference to help the viewer orient himself a little. In a lot of old movies, you'll see a wide shot of people going up a gangplank to a ship, followed by a medium shot from across the line. The argument here is that the gangplank serves as a reference for the audience to hold on to. Page 63. Diagram. Crossing the line with a reference. Other common references which can ease a reversal in screen directions are sidewalks, roads, hallways, tables, cars, boats, anything that is in both shots and has a clearly defined direction of its own. Please note, this does not make a perfect cut, but it's better than nothing. The other not-so-perfect way to reverse screen direction is to cross the line at the same time as you cut on the action. The idea is that the continuity of action over the cut will physiologically cover the reversal in screen direction. Diagram. Crossing the line by cutting on the action. Again, it's not perfect, but in a pinch, it's better than nothing. Page 64. Using screen direction to solve shooting problems. As we learned earlier, screen direction is the direction people and things face when viewed through the camera. It's determined by the axis of action, the line. When you cross the line, you reverse your screen direction, even though nothing has moved but the camera. The corollary to this is, as long as you don't cross the line, as long as you keep the same screen direction, you can move people, things, and cameras anywhere you want. This can help you solve many shooting problems. Let's say you're shooting an interview with a well-known naturalist. Since he'll be talking about the wanderings of the great outdoors, it would look best if he were in an outdoorsy setting. But for reasons of time and money, you have to shoot in his suburban backyard. After a quick reconnoiter of the background, you find your best location and select two camera positions. See diagram. Page 65. From position 1, you can do your wide shot over the shoulder of the reporter, as well as medium shots and close-ups of the naturalist, all with lush trees in the background. So far, so good. But when you move around to position 2 for your shots of the reporter, you see an ugly fence and the neighbor's clothesline in the background. Not exactly the lush natural setting you'd like. Diagram equals mismatched backgrounds. Number 2's background distracts from content of interview. The solution? After you finish with all your shots of the naturalist from position 1, pivot the naturalist and the reporter counterclockwise so that the trees are now behind the reporter, who is still facing screen left. See diagram. Page 66. You see you haven't crossed the line. You have merely pivoted it and your subjects from position A to position B. As long as you stay on the same side of the line and keep the same screen direction, you can move the line anywhere you want. In fact, in a pinch, you could even shoot the reporter's close-ups without the naturalist at another place and time. Diagram equals mismatched backgrounds contribute to content of interview. Matched backgrounds contribute to content of interview. Aha, you might say. It still won't work because we know that there's a fence behind the reporter and not the trees. Well, maybe we know it, but the viewer sure doesn't. All he knows is what he sees on the screen. Screen geography has nothing to do with real geography. Nothing exists for the viewer except what you show him. Once you understand this, you can work wonders. You won't always have to go to the extremes illustrated by this example. Sometimes it's just a matter of moving or pivoting your subject a few feet one way or the other to get to a better shot. Remember, as long as you keep the same screen direction and everything else matches, you've got nothing to worry about. I've moved people closer to windows to get better light on close-ups, put them in different rooms to get better backgrounds. Once, in a very tight situation, I shot 5 different angles without moving the camera, but moving the subject instead, and it worked. Page 67. 5. Camera moves. Why camera moves? There's a tendency among camera persons, especially beginners, to be continually moving the camera, zooming in, zooming out, panning left, panning right, tilting up, tilting down. I guess they feel that they're not earning their money if they just hold the camera still. They are wrong. A camera move should have a purpose. It should in some way contribute to the viewer's understanding of what he sees, of what he's seeing. If it doesn't, the move distracts and calls attention to itself. Camera moves limit you in your editing. If the only shot you have of a certain subject is a zoom, and the zoom lasts 15 seconds, but you only have 5 seconds of narration to go with it, you're stuck. Either you leave the whole move in, and your viewers sit bored for 10 seconds of silence, or you cut in and out of the 5-second piece of the zoom, which is visually jarring. The safe thing to do is to shoot your move, then cover yourself with a couple of static shots of the same thing. You'll be glad you did when you start editing. The basic camera moves are zooms, pans, tilts, and combinations thereof. In general, a zoom in, from wide shot to close-up, directs our attention to whatever it is we're zooming in on. So if you zoom in, try to zoom in on something interesting or important. Diagram, a zoom in directs attention. Page 68. A zoom out, from close-up to wide shot, usually reveals new information. Often it tells us where we are. For example, you could start in a close-up of a man's face talking about flowers, then zoom back to reveal that he's surrounded by flowers. A zoom-out reveals new information. Diagram. Pans, horizontal moves, and tilts, vertical moves, also reveal new information. Pans and tilts review new information. Diagram. One caution about pans. If you pan too fast, vertical lines like fence posts, door frames, etc. will strobe on you, trailing ghost images behind. When in doubt, pan a little slower. An effective way to lead your viewer through a long pan is to follow a smaller object, a person walking, a car perhaps, as it passes by your subject. For example, a wide shot pan across the front of a building is much more interesting with a person walking by, leading the move. Page 69. Making camera moves. The first rule of camera movement is this. Begin and end every move with a well-composed static shot. It's very distracting to cut from a static composition to a move that's already in progress. Likewise, to cut from a move to a static. Oh, you can do it, and sometimes it works when you want to create a feeling of excitement and action, and you can dissolve between static shots and moves, visually blending one scene into another with good results. But why limit your options? If you're going to make a move, hold it steady for a beat or two at the beginning, ease into your move, make the move, ease gradually out of the move, and hold for a beat or two at the end. You'll be glad you did when you start editing. Diagram. Begin and end every move with a well-composed static shot. The other rule of camera movement is this. Always move from an uncomfortable position to a comfortable position. This is especially important in pans when you're moving in a wide horizontal arc. Have you ever seen a camera person start to pan with a passing car, and as he follows the car by, slowly twists himself into a quivering pretzel? He started with his muscles relaxed and then twisting them into a tense, unnatural position. For the smoothest possible move, he should be doing just the opposite. He should get comfortable in his end position, then twist around into the beginning position. That way, when he makes the move, his muscles will be relaxing, untensing, returning smoothly to their natural position. He'll be moving from uncomfortable to comfortable, smoothly, naturally. This is true of any move, not just pans. Page 70. Diagram. Move from uncomfortable to comfortable. One final tip. I found that when combining a zoom with a tilt or a pan, it works smoother if I start the pan or tilt just a fraction of a second before the zoom. I don't know why it works better this way, but it does. Diagram. On combined moves, start the pan or tilt a fraction of a second before the zoom. Page 71. 6. Montages. A montage is a series of related shots used to condense time and distance, set a move, or summarize information. For example, a montage of highway signs, a montage of pretty natural shots, or a montage of company products. Most TV commercials are montages. For a montage to work, it's usually best if each shot is clearly different from the one before it. Otherwise, it looks like a bad cut between two similar shots of the same thing. If you shoot an employee montage with everybody framed the same, it will look like one face changing abruptly into another. But if you shoot a variety of angles and image sizes, the effect can be very nice. Diagram. An ineffective montage, the shots are too similar. Diagram. An effective montage, each shot is different. An easy way to make a nice sign montage is to tilt each one a different way. For some reason, these are called Dutch tilts. Diagram. Page 72. 7. Lighting. Exterior lighting. The most powerful and common source of light is the sun, but for film and TV it has one big disadvantage. It's always moving. It traces an arc across the sky, east to west, horizon to horizon, every day. This means that the angle at which sunlight is falling on our subjects is also constantly changing. Most people look their best in sunlight when the sun is no higher than about 45 degrees above the horizon. When the sun is higher, around the noon hour, it casts ugly shadows on faces. Eye sockets go dark and little shadow beards show up on chins and under cheekbones and noses. Diagram. People look best in sunlight falling in angles of 45 degrees or less. The noontime overhead sun casts ugly shadows. Most exterior shots are made with the subject facing the sun, so it illuminates him directly. Sometimes, though, this isn't possible or desirable. Perhaps the location doesn't permit it, or maybe the sun is bothering your subject's eyes. Or maybe your subject looks really nice with the sun behind him. So you end up shooting with backlight or sidelight. Both conditions cast strong shadows on your subject's face. Diagram. Sidelight and backlight cast strong shadows. Page 73. The shadow cast by backlight and sidelight can be filled in, brightened up with light in two ways, reflectors and fill lights. A reflector is anything which reflects light. It's normally on a board covered with silver paint or foil, but it can also be a white poster board or white wall or a piece of canvas. You use the reflector to bounce sunlight into the shadow areas where it's needed. Diagram. Reflectors fill in shadow areas with bounced sunlight. Any light can be used as a fill light outside, as long as it puts out daylight colored light with a color temperature of 5400 K. The lamp can be 5400 K or it can be 3200 K tungsten with a dichroic filter or a blue gelatin sheet in front to convert it to 5400 K. One disadvantage for using a fill light instead of a reflector is that you need electricity to power it, from a battery, a portable generator, or an extension cord. Another disadvantage is that in order to match the tremendous brightness of the sun, you either have to bring the fill light in very close to the subject or else use a very powerful fill light requiring a lot of electricity. The advantage to a fill light is that, unlike a reflector, it's not directly dependent on the sun. You can place it anywhere you want, at any angle you want, for the best lighting effect and for the maximum comfort of your subject. The fill light is especially useful in completely backlit situations where a reflector may shine and glare right into your subject's eyes. Page 74. Diagram. A fill light brightens up shadow areas regardless of where the sun is. A fill light is the best way to brighten up a shadow cast by the noontime overhead sun. And on overcast days, a light shining directly on your subject can stand in for an absent sun and give your pictures needed brightness and contrast. Interior lighting. There are three basic types of lights used most frequently in interior lighting: focusing quartz, broads, and soft lights. The focusing quartz light is the movie and TV version of the theatrical spotlight. It's the most common, versatile light in use. By moving a lever, you control the intensity and pattern of light it puts out. The range is from spot to flood. At spot, you get a small, concentrated area of light. At flood, you get a spread out, less intense area. Diagram. Focusing quartz lights range from spot to flood. Page 75. One caution on using focusing quartz lights. Don't count on getting a smooth, even pattern of light at every setting. Even at full flood, you may find a hot spot or two. Before doing any really critical lighting, Your best bet is to shine each light on the wall or the floor and run it through the whole range from spot to flood, noticing the light pattern at each setting. Quartz lights, even on flood, put out a hard direct light. This produces sharp-edged dark shadows, which are not always desirable, especially in people shots. To diffuse the light, to spread it out and produce softer, more flattering shadows, we can do one of two things. Either put diffusing material, like spun glass, in front of the light, or bounce the light off a reflector-type surface, like a white wall or ceiling, or a silver-coated space blanket taped to the ceiling. Both methods work well, but they also reduce the amount of light reaching the subject. Diagram. Quartz lights can be softened by diffusion materials in front of the light, or by bouncing the light off a reflector-type surface. Broads are non-focusing lights designed to put out a broad, even light over a large area. They have no fine-tuning controls. All you do is turn them on and point them. The hard direct light from a broad light like that from a focusing quartz can be softened with diffusion material or by bouncing. Page 76. A broad light puts out a flat, even pattern of light. A soft light is a permanent portable bounce of light. It consists of a curved scoop, the inside of which is white or silver colored. A broad-type lamp is mounted facing the scoop so that its light bounces off the curved surface and out towards the subject. Diagram. A soft light is a permanent portable bounce light. The advantages of a soft light over a bounce light are convenience. You can use it anywhere, with no need for a wall or ceiling to bounce off, and control. It's easier to direct the light exactly where you want it. However, it does take up more space. Most lights, be they focusing broads or soft lights, come with barn doors. These are little black flaps which are used to block off light from areas where you don't want it, to shape the pattern of light you put out. They are very useful. Page 77. Diagram. Barn doors shape the pattern of light. Basic lighting setup. The classic basic lighting setup is as follows. See diagram. First, you place your key light to one side of the camera and at about a 45-degree angle above your subject. This is your main light, the basis for the rest of your lighting setup. Unless you have a good reason, no area in your frame should be brighter than the area lit by the key light. The viewer's eye is always attracted first to the brightest area of the frame. If that turns out to be the background, then your lighting isn't working the way it should, or it's working in a special way, which you should be aware of. Page 78. Set up your fill light on the opposite side of the subject from the key light. The fill should be bright enough to partially fill in the shadow from the key, leaving just enough shadow on the subject's face to give a feeling of depth. Completely shadowless lighting is called flat lighting and gives less sense of depth. Diagram. Key light alone equals heavy shadows. Key plus fill equals just enough shadows for feeling of depth. Next, place your backlight. This falls on your subject's head and shoulders from behind, creating a rim of light which visually separates him from the background. The backlight is especially useful when the subject's hair or clothes are similar in color to the background. Diagram. The backlight separates the subject from the background. Last but not least, place your background light. This brings the background up into the same range of illumination as the rest of the scene and gives an added sense of depth. As a general rule, it's a good idea to have your background a little darker than your key area. Page 79. Well, you say, so now I know how to light one person, but how do I light two or three or more? And what happens if they start moving around? Well, you multiply the basic setup. You place a key light for every important area, then start building. It gets complicated, but if you just take it one step at a time, you'll do all right. Often you'll find you can cover more than one subject with the same key light, or that the fall off from one subject's key light can serve as fill light on another subject. A single broad can provide backlight for several people. To avoid multiple unnatural-looking shadows on walls, keep your lights high and your subjects away from the walls. Keep in mind that shadows are less noticeable on dark-colored walls than on light-colored ones, so sometimes a change of scenery can solve a lighting problem. Also, film shows more shadow detail than video, so for TV, you'll have to throw more light into your shadow area. In the last few years, a lot of camera persons, myself included, have begun lighting entire scenes with bounce light. It's not dramatic lighting, but it is quick and efficient, and it looks natural in a lot of situations. Really good lighting for TV and film is an art in itself. Please don't take the basic lighting setup as gospel. Like the rule of thirds in composition, it's a place to start, no more, no less. The best advice I can give you for your first few lighting jobs is to be methodical. Go slow. Put up one light at a time and watch what it does. If you do get confused at some point, turn off all your lights. Then turn them on again, one at a time, so you can see what each light is doing and regain control. Page 80. 8. Doing it. Planning and shooting a sequence. When planning a shoot, the first thing is to decide what you want to end up with. What sort of story do you want to tell? Who will be your audience? How do you want them to react? What things should you emphasize? What should you downplay? Keep all this in mind as you look over the locations and talk with the people you'll be working with. Next, make a shooting plan. Even if it's only in your head, decide where your camera and subjects will be for each shot. For relatively short sequences, your best bet is to shoot the whole thing all the way through in a wide shot, then repeat it in a medium shot and again in a close-up. Then shoot your cutaways. This method uses up a lot of tape or film, but you can be sure you'll have material for editing. It's probably the best way to shoot your first few projects. Later, after you have a better understanding of what you're doing, you can try shooting all the way through in a wide shot, and then just repeating certain sections for medium shots, close-ups, and cutaways. At this stage of the game, you'll have to start thinking about slates. A slate is simply a piece of identification, whether in a fancy clapboard or a scrap of paper. When you have many different shots to piece together in the editing, you need some way to quickly tell one from the other. That's what slates are for. You write a scene number or a description on the slate, hold it in front of the camera, and run off a second or two of it before you shoot the scene. Page 81. Slates are wonderful things. They never forget, even if you do. Anytime you have the slightest doubt that the editor might not know what a scene is or where it goes, tell him with a slate. You should do this even if you're going to edit everything yourself. In the first place, it's good discipline. It forces you to think about how the pieces are going to fit together. Secondly, who wants to spend half an editing session wondering where this scene goes or where that one goes when a simple slate could tell you in a second? Also, if you number various takes of the same scene, you can go immediately to the one marked best on your location notes and not waste time reviewing bad takes. Shooting scripts and storyboards. Often it helps to make up a shooting script. This is simply a list of what you're going to shoot and how you're going to shoot it. For example, video. 1. Wide shot, salesman by car. Audio. Salesman. Hi, folks, let me tell you about the new Zootmobile. 2. Medium shot, salesman pan as he moves to sticker on window. This car is the greatest. And cheap? I'll tell you it's cheap. Look at this sticker. Number 3. Close-up, sticker. 25,000 drachmas, and that's including tax tag and dealer prep. 4. Wide shot, salesman by car. So come on down and buy one today, okay? Okay. Page 82. Sometimes you can visualize better when you're going to shoot if you make up a storyboard. A storyboard is a series of simple drawings. You can do them with stick figures representing the shoots you plan to make. Drawing a storyboard is like a free practice shoot, and it doesn't use up any film or tape. For example, see diagram. Page 83, shooting out of sequence. For some sequences, especially those involving a lot of lighting changes, there are advantages to shooting the scenes out of sequence, out of order. Say, for example, that only the first 30 seconds and the last 15 seconds of your sequence need to be shown in a wide shot. What you do is set up for your whole wide shot, shoot the first 30 seconds, cut, then jump ahead and shoot the last 15 seconds right then without moving the camera. This way, you're finished once and for all with that camera position. Now you can move your lights, microphones, and anything else around you for your other shots. And you don't have to worry about putting everything back again for the end wide shot because you've already done it. Take another example. Say you have a sequence consisting of 4 scenes. You decide that scenes 1 and 3 will be shot from camera position A. Scenes 2 and 4 will look best from position B. If you have control of the situation, it makes a lot more sense to shoot scene 1 from position A, stay there and shoot scene 3, and then move to position B for scenes 2 and 4. That way you move the camera 1 time. If you shoot the scenes in their natural order, you'll move the camera 3 times. From A for scene 1 to B for scene 2 to A for scene 3 and to B to scene 4. See diagram. When circumstances allow, you can save a lot of time and energy by shooting out of sequence. Just remember to plan well and don't forget your slates. Page 84, communicating. Everybody has his or her own philosophy of working. I'd like to make a small pitch for mine. I believe in communicating. I try to let everybody, from my assistants to the people who will appear on camera, know what we're going to do. Before we start, I discuss the shooting plan, ask for suggestions, and let everybody look through the camera. I try to get across the idea that we're all on the same team and we're going to have fun. Most of the time we do. Of course, I also make it understood that for the shoot to go smoothly, somebody has to be in charge, and that somebody is B. But since by this point everybody knows what we're doing and why, mine can usually be a benevolent dictatorship. Working in uncontrolled situations. Sooner or later, you'll find yourself working in a totally uncontrolled situation. If you're a television news camera person, you'll be doing it every day, but you can still use what you've learned in this book. You can always try for a decent composition. You can construct basic sequences by regularly changing your camera angle and image size, and by grabbing cutaways wherever you can. Even if it's the old standby of a close-up of another camera person, you can maintain your screen direction and cover yourself with neutral shots when you cross the line. Page 85. You can let your subject enter and exit the frame cleanly. You can still shoot great sequences. You just have to hustle more to get them. Shooting in uncontrolled situations can be exciting and fun, especially when it's all over and you know that in spite of everything, you've got footage that works. Page 86. Some final words. Making moving pictures is a subjective art. There is no absolute rights and wrongs, but there are some things that usually work, like the things I've explained to you in this book. If you want to stray from the basics, fine. Just be sure you understand what you're doing and why. Otherwise, you lose control of your work and confuse your viewers. Until you're really sure of yourself, shoot a basic sequence for protection before going all out artsy-craftsy. You'll be glad you did. Learn to welcome criticism of your work, and learn to criticize yourself. It's the only way to progress. Every criticism, no matter how ridiculous it may seem, can tell you something about your work. Don't bask in your successes. Analyze them and find out why they worked so you can repeat them. Use the same process to evaluate and learn from your failures. Professionalism is based on the ability to repeat your successes and avoid repeating your failures.